You were first to talk about the Ellis Act, when it wasn't before it was even popular. Or sexy to talk about it. And we're wondering what you could do for renters in the affordable housing being built. I know that's up to the government, because didn't he veto something? So, and then legislation on buyout regulations that you sponsored or co-sponsored, and to let tenants stay in San Francisco. So it's very impressive. And affordable housing trust funds to stand up to developers to build what their fair share. Now, you could update me on some of these issues.
Sure.
What assembly committee would you like to serve on?
Okay.
And I was going to touch on City College and updates on that, and how schools are being privatized, and maybe developers want to use the property at City College. Is huge, a lot of property.
Makes you wonder about that. Yeah.
It's a lot of property, and then there's a great big reservoir next to it, big empty reservoir. And so we see poor government management blamed on working in the poor, and we talk about the BART strike, and how they're blamed for mismanagement when, they should just manage BART. And then the recycling center, I want Eli to go over that with you. And what about the homeless bill of rights, too? So the next debate, you said that you don't know.
I don't really know what the next one is.
Cross that out. I'll ask you that. I invited both candidates, and you only showed up. And welcome to SFLiberalBuzz, where liberal values are civil rights first. This is David Campos. He's supervisor of District 9. We are lucky to get him here today. He was very gracious. We invited both candidates, and he was the one who showed up. We want to wish you a happy Pride and happy Juneteenth. Now here, we'll get right down to it. As Police Commissioner David Campos stood up to the Police Officers Association on behalf of the cannabis community, and he took a lot of heat for it from Gary DeLamus, who is actually still on his case. So, yeah, HopeNet got raided, and then rude things happened to them, so it was kind of mean.
Yeah, unfortunately, medical cannabis places are constantly getting raided right now. Why is this? They're abiding by regulations, abiding by laws, but yet they still want to get, quote-unquote, busted by the law when they're still abiding by patients' rights and patients' safety and health and safety.
Well, I think it's a misguided policy. Right now, for actually quite some time, you've had the federal government, I think, wasting resources trying to go after medical cannabis dispensaries that are following state law. And for me, it's always been about the right of patients. If you are ill and cannabis can help you, you should have access to that medication. And the voters in California have already, spoken on that. And in San Francisco, my hope is that San Francisco is better than it's been before. I think that our police department rightly is not prioritizing going after cannabis. I think I'm lucky. I think I have the best job in the world. We get to live in San Francisco, and I get to represent San Francisco and District 9, which has some pretty incredible neighborhoods, Mission, Bernal, Portola. But beyond that, I think that we're very lucky that we live in the greatest country in the world, in the greatest city in that country. And we're not perfect, but I think we have a lot to be grateful for. And so I'm very honored to be able to do this job, as challenging as it can be at times. It really is a pleasure.
Well, you were first to talk about the Ellis Act before it was cool.
Yeah, I am very proud of the fact that I have been consistent. My
Would you like to give a brief history of the Ellis Act in case nobody knows exactly what that is?
So the Ellis Act is basically a case that, it comes out of, it actually goes back to a Supreme Court ruling by the California Supreme Court that basically said that if a landlord wants to get out of business, they can do what happens in the free market, which is that they can sell, their property. They can do that, and that there was no law that was really necessary. The Ellis Act then was crafted by the state legislature, and what it does, is that it's supposed to allow a small-time property owner who wants to go out of the business of being a landlord to do precisely that. And the purpose was really to let longtime landlords who wanted to stop doing that work, let them do that. What we have seen with the Ellis Act is, though, that it has been abused. And what's happening in San Francisco is that we have a number of speculators that are coming in, buying property, and overnight flipping that property, not the intent really of the Ellis Act. And so what you're seeing as a result of that is a lot of people being displaced. The number of Ellis Act evictions, going up by 300%. And then for every Ellis Act eviction, you have 4 or 5 people that are evicted through what I call buyouts. So it is a real problem.
Do you happen to know these statistics of the types of people who are being evicted, whether it's families, single adults, veterans, seniors?
Well, I think it's an epidemic that is hurting everyone across the board, and it's not just low-income people, it's middle-income people, and I think that most of us, especially if you're a renter, most renters are one eviction away from being kicked out of San Francisco. That's
what most people don't realize. They always figure Ellis Act eviction. Okay, it's the low-income people that's being affected. That's a misnomer, correct?
Absolutely, and you can see that it's happening in every single neighborhood. It's people would be surprised that the highest number of evictions, if you count not just Ellis Act evictions, but all kinds of evictions, are happening in the Castro, for instance. The mission that I represent is right behind that. What's happening in San Francisco is what I've been talking about for more than a year now, this tale of two cities. San Francisco has a great deal of wealth. There are many wonderful things that are happening, but many people are being left behind, left out of this prosperity. We have the highest income in the country, we have the highest rents in the country, and we also have the distinction of having the fastest growing inequality in the entire nation. What that means is that the difference between the haves and the have-nots is growing in San Francisco, and it's not just low-income people that are being left behind, it's everyone. It's middle-income people, even upper-middle-income people are having a hard time living in the city, and I think that we need a change of course. We need to go back to the basics and figure out how we can have a city that allows middle-income people, working-class people, low-income people live in San Francisco. I don't think that San Francisco should only be a city where only millionaires can live. There's nothing wrong with millionaires living here, but what about regular people having an opportunity to be here?
Most of the housing stock in San Francisco was built by working class people back when working class people had a say in government, and they had more earning power. And speculators didn't bank speculation takes up more than 12% of any economy. You're going to have this oligarchy.
Speculation is rampant in San Francisco, and it cuts across the line of different people from different backgrounds who are speculating. And what I think needs to happen is what we're doing right now, which is that we have an anti-speculation tax that's going to be on the ballot. It's actually something that goes back to the days of Harvey Milk, because even in the 70s when Harvey Milk was, the late Harvey Milk was on the Board of Supervisors, the issue of speculators coming in and taking advantage of the situation was already a problem, and I think
I'm glad you brought up the anti-speculation tax. The problem with it last time was then Mayor Dianne Feinstein canceled it. What do you plan to do to help with you and your colleagues actually make sure this actually goes forth?
Well, there's actually a measure that has been presented by Supervisor Marr that I have co-sponsored along with Supervisors Avalos and Kim that we hope to put on the ballot. And I think that, that measure, like a lot of things that are happening, including my campaign for Assembly, are about taking back San Francisco and saying, this city belongs to all of us. And it's not just the wealthy that have a right to live here. And it's, by the way, people from all walks of life. And it's not just people who have been here for a long time. A lot of newcomers are having a tough time as well. And it's including tech workers. The reality is that the tech worker themselves, they're also being impacted by this displacement. Not all of them are millionaires, not all of them can afford to live in San Francisco. And what I think needs to happen is for us to refocus our energy so that we have a city that builds affordable housing across the line, not just low income but middle income. You know, we have the smallest percentage of children in San Francisco of any city in the country. I think that's sad. I don't know that it's something that we should be proud of it. I think that we need to do what we can to let families with kids actually be able to afford to live here.
Well, well-paying manufacturing jobs are a thing of the past here. But I do remember driving into San Francisco as a child, just driving over the bridge all the time. We used to come into San Francisco and first thing you'd smell was the bread burning, you know, burnt crusty bread, and the beer brewing.
I saw that smile. You remember that, huh?
So
Well, yeah.
those days are gone. You don't smell that when you come in the city anymore. And the manufacturing is gone. I mean, the licorice factory, all the
The
factories.
Levi Stadium is now a school. I mean, granted, public education is important, but it is considered a San Francisco icon.
We got a lot of manufacturing here that and the middle class follows manufacturing. It creates a middle class.
Well, I think that you have seen, and you are seeing an effort to protect, you know, those types of jobs and to promote manufacturing jobs. You know, there is an effort to protect PDR jobs, production, distribution, repair, which have been a source of opportunity for middle-income people for many, many years. And I think that we need to create more of those jobs and to protect the ones that we do have. But it really is about investing. And what I tell people is that, you know, San Francisco did not get to this inequity simply because that's how the market, you know, works. We actually have a city government that has made choices that have gotten us to where we are. A city government that has prioritized big corporations, has given them big tax breaks, and in the process has forgotten about you know, the regular person, the small business owner who is truly the real economic engine. I think that we need to get our priorities straight in San Francisco. I think we need to go back to the basics.
Such as when a tax break is written, put it into the law, it says you have to get so much back, otherwise you have to pay back the difference if you don't comply with going back to community organizations, nonprofits. Maybe that can actually help people. It's like, hey, having such as Twitter downtown in an office building, great for the community. Granted, they have supposed to give back to the community, but there's really no leverage to say they have or have them not. If they do not comply to this, they still get their tax break.
Well, that's, you know, I voted against the Twitter tax break not because I'm against Twitter or the tech industry. I want them to be here, but I do believe that if you're going to give that kind of a tax break where you're changing the rules in the practice, that there should be something that is expected in return. And in the case of the Twitter tax break, there was no community benefits agreement that was required, and the Citizens Advisory Committee that actually was created to oversee the tax break noted that most of these companies did not meet their objectives, did not fulfill the things they said they were going to do. And you know, you don't have people from those neighborhoods being hired by these companies. You don't have these companies investing in the way that they need to invest in these neighborhoods. Again, we want them here, but we want everyone in San Francisco to benefit from their presence, and that's unfortunately not happening.
I do go to some of the community meetings in the Tenderloin and Soma, and not once did I remember Twitter ever coming to one of the community benefit meetings and presenting themselves saying, hey, we're going to be coming to the neighborhood. This is what we're going to bring to the community.
Well,
For example, the Tenderloin Futures Collaborative that meets every month, they have different businesses that come in the neighborhood, like a wine bar is in the neighborhood. They're waiting for the PCN license, PCN hearing. What is she doing? But in the meantime, she's going to different organizations saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm bringing, I'm going to be hiring local people. This is the type of the things that need to be done. Like big businesses come to communities like, hey, for instance, maybe Instagram may decide to come to San Francisco. They should at least go to the communities like, hey, we're coming to San Francisco. Do you have a problem with this? What can we do to help you get the community out? What do you think about this?
Well, I think that there has to be more that's done, and I want to make a distinction between the companies and the leadership of the companies and the workers, because I do think that there are many workers who are involved, who are interested in being involved, but unfortunately it's the executive leadership of these companies that is not making the right decisions in terms of investing in these communities. And I do think that there's an opportunity to be had. I mean, I actually have worked with a number of tech companies that have gotten involved. You know, we're working, for instance, with Square right now.
They have tech parties.
They're working with small businesses
Hiring.
in places like the Mission, you know, to help them. I think we need to see more of that because I think that not only helps the community, but it also helps the companies. You know,
I know
it
that startup
enriches them.
companies actually get back to the community, like, hey, this is what we're doing, inputs, how can I help back?
So, what assembly committees would you like to serve on when you go to Sacramento?
Well, I want to continue to focus on housing. I think that housing has to be the top priority given what's happening in San Francisco right now. And one of the first thing that I'm going to do when I'm elected to the State Assembly is to continue the fight for reforming the Ellis Act. We have a bill that Senator Mark Leno introduced that unfortunately just failed in the State Assembly. And I want to go to Sacramento and reintroduce something along the lines of what is being proposed. One of the things that I think I bring to the table is that I have relationships with many people who play key roles in the State Assembly. I'm endorsed by Assemblywoman Toni Atkins, who just became the Speaker of the State Assembly.
I met her, she's
And
a nice woman.
the largest caucus in the Assembly, the Latino caucus, has endorsed me as well. And I think that those relationships with them and others will help me pass legislation, but I think that we need to focus on housing. I also want to, focus on education because I do think that education is the big civil rights issue of the day.
Did you realize that one of the reasons the San Francisco
City College?
education level is so low is because when somebody's arrested and go to county jail, they don't have a high school diploma or GED, they can actually register in county jail for a diploma or GED itself. And when they're released early, before 30 days, those names are still on a record, which means they have an incomplete on their names. It's one of the main reasons why San Francisco education is so low on the records, because of this. I mean, I love Sheriff Ross for doing this, giving somebody a second chance while they're in jail.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, their names never taken off the records, and this is one of the reasons why. How would you actually help this?
Well, I think
solve this?
education is a great equalizer. I think that we need to focus on the K through 12 level. I think that we need to focus on higher education. That's why I'm spending so much time on City College, making sure that we save that institution. And I think that with folks who have been previously incarcerated, I believe in redemption. I think that we need to give them the opportunity to restart their lives. And once you pay your dues, I think that you do your time. And you do whatever amends you need to make to society, that there has to be an opportunity given to that individual to make something of themselves, and I think that education is key. So I also want to go to Sacramento and focus on reforming the criminal justice system, because I think our criminal justice system is broken. I think that we need to move away from this infatuation that we have with prisons, and not only putting people in prisons, but also building more prisons. I think that we need to invest that money in alternatives to prison, and we actually need to reinvest that money in education, because I think that I would rather have California be known as the state that builds more schools and invests in education, as opposed to the state that just builds more prisons, which I think is what's happening.
The recycling center
which was a hot
going to
topic
be
today.
a topic today. Can you talk about what
Sure.
happened on the board of the?
Real quick, about a minute for this.
We had a hearing that Supervisor Marr called on the closure of a number of recycling centers, and we had presentations from city agencies and also the state that basically said, San Francisco is lagging behind in terms of the number of recycling centers that we have. Per capita, we have the worst rate in terms of numbers in the state, and we're not going to meet our obligations to the environment and our objectives unless we actually increase the number of recycling centers. And there are those of us, like Supervisor Marr, like myself, who believe that there should be recycling centers throughout the city, and that every supervisorial district has a responsibility to be equitable, and that we need to have them located throughout the city so that there is access for everyone.
Have zero waste.
Yes,
We were promised zero waste some years back. And also, I wanted to touch on the homeless Bill of Rights bill
Actually,
that went nowhere.
I wanted to do a comment quick. During the comments today, a gentleman by the name of Philip, he made a comment about why doesn't the mayor's office contact every property owner itself. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? Instead of just, okay, we're gonna close you down because we got too much high traffic around here, which goes to the homeless bill of rights. Because many of the people who utilize the facility at Safeway are homeless, and this is some of their income right here.
Well, I think that there should be someone from the city, whether it's in the mayor's office, the board of supervisors, contacting Safeway. And I do think that, we need to protect the rights of every individual, and I don't think that we should criminalize poor people. We should not criminalize the homeless. I think that the response is to provide services, and I think that there's a lot more that we can do on that front. And what I want people to know is that, this election is really important in November. We're talking about replacing Tom Amiano, who has been a champion for regular people, for working class people, for middle income people for many, many years. The person who follows on Tom Amiano's footsteps should continue to be a champion. We need a true progressive champion. That's why I'm running. That's why I have Tom's endorsement.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, for showing up here tonight.
We wanted you to follow us all on Twitter, right here.
Yeah, it's right down here.
Yeah, it's there somewhere. And Assembly District 17 debate is on Axis of Love TV channel on YouTube. That's Axis of Love TV. That's a channel on YouTube. There's 3-part debate, and it's fascinating. And please buy a street sheet, and give all the money goes to the person selling the street sheet. And also adopt a sheltered pet over here on Alabama Street, not far from the studio.
SPCA does have special
SPCA,
deals.
yes, they do, and they're a great organization, and so is Pets Unlimited. And shop the Mission and Tenderloin Family Markets, you know the ones I mean. And also we have an end of the month dinner at Axis of Love. It's at the Women's Building next Wednesday at 4:20. So I know you understand the implications of that. And thank you. I want to thank my guest David Campos for coming.
Thank you.